Although France is holding snap elections and could have an entirely different government, a Weimar Triangle meeting of defense ministers was held in Paris. After years of strained relations, Poland and its new government see the format as a top priority in shaping policy among European nations.
And now joining us to discuss today's meeting and the future of the format in light of political developments in France is Emile Jammine from France 24. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, let's start with some of these fundamental agreements. We heard from the Polish defense minister. There are essentially 3 points. Joint German-French-Polish exercises in Poland next year, a joint initiative to extend mobility activities, and of course the continued aspirations of Ukraine and EU and NATO. So, there's a lot of these high-profile meetings. Is this now the motor that is driving Europe forward in all these policy areas? Are we going to see more of this rather than hear from Brussels, or how do we make of this?
Well, it's basically the 3 largest growing economies of Europe at the same time coming together and saying that we need to take a stand and make a Eurocentric bastion for possibly NATO as well as Europe going forward. And this is what they've come together, the first Weimar meeting between these defense ministers since 2015. So it is quite significant in the wake of everything that has transpired, especially with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also the recent European parliamentary elections, which were touched on quite significantly, at least by Sébastien Lecornu, the French defense minister, in today's meetings. But it is interesting, certainly in terms of the fact that they are taking on a military stance this time around with those military drills taking place in Poland next year. This hasn't been the case prior to this, and it really is just a unified front as far as France, Poland and Germany are concerned, a front which we most likely have, generally have associated economically previously, and now it is a military exercise. So it is very curious to see how this will go forward, certainly with a potentially new French government in place after those elections on the 7th of July, the second round, the first round on the 30th of June. All to be seen. But at least as far as Lecornu was concerned, he said that defense comes first, and despite elections on the way, this won't interrupt or interfere in any way with this joint effort between these 3 countries. So a big responsibility on the shoulder of France, Germany and Poland to come together. And we've seen a recent impetus, a drive from both the heads of states as well as the foreign ministers in recent meetings. That was the 22nd of May between those foreign ministers, and that very important Weimar agenda that was published. And now with the defense ministers going forward, we're seeing this new driven momentum between all 3 countries.
Now, Poland has been betting big on this format as the driver of being able to offer whatever influence it has on the bigger Western European powers such as France and Germany. But that said, you mentioned the upcoming elections, snap elections in France. Therefore, what can we say about this format and its future? Is it still something yet to be determined? Or is it something that we can be sure will be a major element to European decision-making?
Well, it is interesting, just given the fact that the ministers were keen to stress that the elections won't have a bearing on how quickly aid or assistance will be pushed forward for Ukraine or Moldova, because these are 2 of the fundamental tenants providing assistance for those countries. And so the elections in France won't have any say on whether that is sped up. They won't try and make sure that those goes through before the elections. And then, interestingly enough, Jordan Bardella, the Rassemblement National president, the National Rally, who look like they are ahead in the polls and could very much win that parliamentary election, he has now reiterated actually that Europe must unite in the face of Russian aggression. This is a new statement from him, so that is quite interesting. And that basically points to the fact that whatever the agenda has been set now, it is likely still to continue in some way, at least post the election here.
Let me interrupt you there, Jean, because I remember this quote as well, and I think it was just a few days ago. Mr. Badea said very much that he's totally not in favor of sending any more long-range support to Ukraine. Now he's changed his mind a little bit, or maybe just adapted policy so it sounds more digestible. He's one person in all this. The far right has been on the rise. It's in Germany, it's in Austria. So at which point, I mean, one angle you're looking at the optics, yes, of course, these ministers on this highest level want to keep the unity going, but then it looks like the reality might be very different. So how much in danger is such a course if potentially France does not continue its course under Macron? Macron will be busy with a house in disarray. So how much of a partner can France be? This will not be a triangle anymore. This will be some kind of other kind of mathematical shape.
Well, there is a worry from at least the liberals in France that what you could see is a similar situation to how the trifecta alliance was under the former Polish government, that more leaning right government, and there seemed to be a stalemate as far as the relations were concerned. And now under Donald Tusk, basically relations have leveled out again, and they're worried that now with the Rassemblement National in charge, that could go back to the way it was. Interestingly, Bardella has said that basically they won't be sending troops, they will only send ammunition. So that will still carry on. Nonetheless, he's made his position clear, whereas Macron has been far more ambiguous in his rhetoric, and has also drawn the ire of Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, when he intimated that those troops would be sent to Ukraine, at least to help train those Ukrainian soldiers there on the front lines, not necessarily partake in the war, but it was something that Germany itself said absolutely no to, and many of the EU alliance partners as well were very much against that, and France seemed to be going a bit solo. Now with the National Rally, they've made their stance much more firmly clear, yet they will have to toe a particular European line, and it is very interesting because then we might see a more gravitating towards the center once again. Bardella now calming down the rhetoric as of the statements today. So you might see once they are in charge, they might have to be kept in check if they do get in charge, of course. But at this stage, despite their lead in the polls, the RN, it doesn't look like they could still get a majority in government, and that could have further implications. Nonetheless, Sébastien Lecornu, the French defense minister, says that even if it's not him in the defense ministry position, come that crucial NATO summit in Washington in July, France's policies will still be kept, and the defense mandate can still be at least adhered to and accepted as the way going forward for the European allies in the time to come. It does remain to be seen, and it is impossible to really say until we actually know the election results.
I think one of the trends that we've seen in this European Union election is that the center parties have moved a little bit further to the right due to all of the rhetoric in the campaign. We've seen this shift to the far right in a broader picture. But could it also be true for the far right that they have to move a little bit to the left and come a little bit closer to the center in order to govern in France and be acceptable to the larger populace?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about making the right friends and getting those alliance partners to back you and forming those coalitions which can be structurally sound going forward, no matter who you are, whether you are the right, currently polling at around 35%, whether you're on the left, currently polling at around 29%, or even if you are indeed the center, which is a very firm center here in France. If I can just give it a French perspective, it is unlikely that the likes of the Renaissance Party of Macron would be split or would have to make a decision whether to go right or left. They would very much keep their base intact. And that means that the far right of Marine Le Pen and the Rassemblement National will have to find partners elsewhere, like Reconquête of Éric Zemmour, that's the far right. And that still may not be enough. And then it would possibly turn to some partners in the Républicain, the center-right party of France. which has shown some desire to possibly split. That is the one party, but even then, it may still not be enough. And so there is a lot of deliberation, even for the likes of Le Rassemblement National, to decide whether it wants to gravitate towards the center, where it might find a little bit more support to make its base reach a level that would be in line with the majority, or whether it would actually find that even keeping and steering more extreme right would be, in fact, a viable solution for itself. As it stands, the coalition partners are still up in the air, and the effects that could have on any defense or alliance with the likes of Germany or Poland is something far more down the line that it simply cannot be speculated on at the moment for Rassemblement National if they do get into power. Again, a coalition partner between the center and the left, you can't rule that out at this stage. So it is very much because we have three big bastions on the right, on the center, and on the left. All three may have to find some kind of compromise and gravitate towards each other.
Well, in your accounting there, Jean-Emile, it doesn't sound like it's going to be an easy decision. It will be probably a lot of messy politics until it's clear and settled. Meanwhile, we have the NATO summit, as you said, but also looking at these three countries, if we're looking at what you just described in France, I think very much not unified at this point in time politically. There's a big question mark. What will France look like at the end of the summer? Looking at Germany, also, Olaf Scholz, that whole coalition government, weakened as well. Potentially elections there, we're not sure, but that's what we're hearing, rumors. And Poland actually coming out of this as the strongest player. Also, if we're looking at the European Parliament elections, Donald Tusk's alliance there won, the strongest party, beating out Law and Justice. Very much, I think, a resounding victory also for policy. Does this maybe also now pay dividends for Poland on a defense front? Does that mean that this Weimar Triangle, that force is actually more in Warsaw than it is in Berlin or in Paris? Will Paris and Berlin now listen more to Warsaw? What's your assessment of that?
Well, you would like to think that they would listen more, just because Poland is on the doorstep of where all of the major problems are transpiring, not only with the war in Ukraine, but also on the border with Belarus, as Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz mentioned today. He said, we are building the shield on the eastern border, the Shield East, that big project, a multi-million euro project to help with that migrant crisis. And he is right in the center of where all of this, where the hotspot is in European defense. And you would hope that the likes of Germany and France, where the fighting is not hot in any kind of way, they would look to Poland and say, okay, you can lead by example. And it is interesting that the majority of Eastern European countries chose to go more towards the center, and Donald Tusk very much an example there, barring Slovakia, of course. So in terms of actually having a direct part to play in all of this, Poland can set an example. And yet we have to bear in mind the economic structures of the European Union and how much say that these larger countries have in terms of Germany and France, and see if that kind of backbone is translated. It can only be said that when the war or when any kind of fighting does get transmitted towards the west of Europe, does it suddenly find itself having to wake up? And the worry for Poland is that might come at a too late a time. Nonetheless, because Donald Tusk has such a strong mandate, as you mentioned, and because he won so convincingly, at least he can hold the center, very much in the center of Europe, geographically speaking, as well as with the rising economy of Poland. It can be at least some kind of I would say a guiding figure that Donald Tusk can play right now.
And let's not forget also that with Donald Tusk's party there, part of the EPP, the strongest one in the European Parliament as well, that I think will add to all of that cloud, as you said. We'll close it there. Thank you so much there, Jean-Emile, Jammine there, France 24, giving us insights for the Weimar Triangle and also French politics. Thank you so much.